I'd like to call to order the work session on April 5th, 2021. We are all present. Our city clerk will now give information on how to participate in tonight's meeting.
While the Goodyear City Council meetings are open to the public, the occupancy remains reduced to implement social distancing. Seating is generally available on a first-come basis. Face masks are required and must be worn when moving throughout the building. While work sessions do not have a public comment component, our residents still have several ways to address the council and may view meetings using Facebook or the live session link on the meeting video page on the city clerk's office website. Meetings are also available on YouTube, both live and after the meeting. The public may always contact the mayor and council at any time by sending an email to gycouncil@goodyearaz.gov.
Thank you. We have our agenda item. We have three items tonight. I would like to remind council that staff will be pausing intermittently to answer any question. So the first item is a request to continue the Ride Choice program of FY22. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much. I'm Christine McMurdy. I'm the Engineering Department Project Management Coordinator. It's great to be back with all of you in person. With me tonight is the new manager of Accessible Transit Services at Valley Metro, Tom Young. Tom recently marked his one-year anniversary with Valley Metro in February, joining the agency just in time for a national pandemic. I'm going to turn the presentation over to him so he can tell you more about his background and how the Ride Choice program has helped our ADA-certified residents get around Goodyear. Tom?
Thank you, Christine, for that introduction. Mayor Lord, Vice Mayor Stipp, council members, I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you tonight about Valley Metro services for people with disabilities and exactly how these customers are using the services right here in Goodyear. So a little bit of my background. I'm marking about 40 years in the public transit industry right now. I've spent about half my career with the public sector and half the career with private sector. I always like to say that because since Valley Metro's services are run with a lot of contracted service, I can actually say, you know, I've been on both sides of it, so you can't pull anything on me. I know all the games you can play. So prior to coming to Valley Metro, I was at Metropolitan Atlanta Regional Transit Services, where I was the Assistant General Manager responsible for all services with rubber wheels. So that included their fixed route service, their paratransit service, and then all of their non-revenue vehicles, maintenance and operating of those. So kind of with that, today I'm planning to give a quick overview of the ADA paratransit program at Valley Metro. I'm going to talk about the rideshare program, hit on where people are using it and how they're using it for both programs, and then touch a little bit on our vision for the future and how we're going to be moving forward with these services. So starting with the ADA Complimentary Paratransit Service, the ADA is basically the most comprehensive civil rights legislation for people with disabilities. As the ADA was put together, it really focused on the fixed route system, the fixed route bus. It actually made public accommodation the focus of fixed route. So everything that came with complimentary paratransit is comparing that service to regular fixed route service. The service area, the service hours, everything a customer experiences is based off fixed route. The ADA also came up with very detailed eligibility process for people to qualify for the paratransit program. Now, what was interesting is they look at people's abilities, not the disability or any medical conditions, but they truly focus on what's a person's ability to get to a bus, to get on a bus, to pay a fare, identify where you need to get off of the bus, and then get off the bus into your final destination. So eligibility for paratransit is not necessarily about the disability, but it's how people function. Now, one of the pieces with the ADA eligibility focused around fixed route is especially in areas like Goodyear. You have very limited fixed route service, so you have a very small opportunity for complimentary paratransit service. So one of the reasons that we set up an alternative transportation program called Ride Choice was just exactly for that. It's a program that doesn't follow the fixed route. We build it to where it offers some flexibility so people would want to use it. So as a comparison, ADA paratransit requires a day in advance reservation. With the Ride Choice program, pick up the phone and call and say, I need to go to the grocery store because I just ran out of milk, and you can get service the same day. So it's a lot more flexible. The fare is a little bit lower than the ADA paratransit, and it's $3 a trip versus the $4 for the paratransit. And what we do is we rely on publicly available providers such as Uber or taxi companies or other private and public providers to get the service done. Currently, our broker contracts with 14 different providers to ensure that people get service. The providers have both ambulatory vehicles, and we have a lot of our providers that actually operate vehicles with wheelchair lifts for anybody who needs accessibility. Check my notes to see if I forget to say anything. So back in October of 2019, Goodyear chose to start a 2-year pilot program for the Ride Choice program. And to be eligible for that, it was decided that people would first have to qualify through the ADA paratransit program, and then they become eligible for the Ride Choice program. So what's happened since the implementation of the Ride Choice program? First, I want to talk about people. So on this chart right here, you'll see a red vertical line that kind of goes right at April 2020. April 2020 is when the majority of the communities were shut down because of COVID. So you started the demonstration in October, and what you can see by this chart is the blue line is the number of people that used paratransit. And then the orange line is the number of people that used the Ride Choice program. And this is all Goodyear residents at this time. So early on, what happened prior to COVID is people were testing out the Ride Choice program, but they were still pretty dependent on the paratransit program because that's what they knew how to use. They knew the phone number, they knew how to access it, they knew how to schedule. So we had people testing it, but really still relying on paratransit. After COVID hit, April was the lowest point of service, but then starting again in May, people started traveling a little bit at a time. So you can see in the trend here, what has happened is people in Goodyear said, let's use the Ride Choice program. We don't know exactly why, but it's continued through November to grow, and even starting the beginning of this year, we see more people using Ride Choice than what is using paratransit. Now, we have a few assumptions. One of those assumptions is with Ride Choice, I can call today, I get a vehicle, and I don't have to share the vehicle. So it's automatically social distancing. That could be part of it. We're not quite sure at this time, but Ride Choice is becoming a very popular choice here in Goodyear. Looking at the same time frame, but looking at trips itself, you can see the exact same trend. Early on in the pilot program, first 3 months, people were testing Ride Choice, but they were still really dependent on the paratransit service to get places. After April 2020, same thing is you can see the exact same trend. People are taking trips on Ride Choice and not as heavily relying on the paratransit program. So where are people traveling? This is our paratransit program right here. And looking at this map, I know it gets a little bit busy, but what we tried to do in the same first 13 months of the program is map up where people are being picked up and where they're being dropped off at. And many times you'll see a blue circle around the P's, and that's showing that we not only picked somebody up there, but we dropped them off and brought them back home. So for the paratransit program, you can see in Goodyear itself, the concentration of pickups is that very small area that's 3/4 of a mile around the fixed route. And people are traveling, some local, a lot of it is throughout the valley, however. Now, what's interesting on this slide is I kind of labeled how people are using it, and only 5% of the trips in this 13-month period were actually for leisure type activities. Leisure activities we classify as going to church, hair appointments, visiting friends, and neighbors. So not a lot of trips were being done for leisure. It's mostly employment, medical, and school trips. Looking at the ride choice travel options, the first extinction right now, as you look at shopping and leisure, people were heavily using the ride choice program for leisure activities and just to the shopping to get groceries and other needed items. You can also see where different from paratransit is people throughout the Goodyear community are using the ride choice program. Most of the program on the ride choice, it was on the previous slide, you get up to 20 trips a month, 8 miles or less, and it's $3. Or if it's for work, employment, or medical, you can get up to 50 trips per month. Anything that's over 8 miles, the person puts in $2 a mile. But we also implemented what's called a 400-mile program where people can travel up to 400 miles within a month. Maximum trip length is 50 miles, and they pay $3 for that. So that worked great for people going to dialysis 3 days a week or other routine medical appointments that required a longer travel period. Now, one of the things, and this was on the previous slide that kind of showed the number of people that were using the service. When we look at active riders, we kind of map it per month. So 22 active riders was the most in any 1 month on the ride choice program. That was the highest amount. But when I put that chart together, I wasn't even thinking that the following month, I think there was 18 people that used it, and many of those were different people. So 22 active riders was the biggest one, but if you look at the full 13 months, there's 54 different people that are actually using ride choice. So and it's more than 50% of the people that are eligible are actually active users. What we don't know out of all this information is, had COVID not happened, what would it really look like if people hadn't changed their travel patterns, if people hadn't sheltered in? The program, it could be exactly what we're seeing today, or it could be double what it is today. I think the only way we're going to really tell is look at the next 3 to 6 months and see, as things start opening back up, what happens with the program. So what's our vision for the future with these programs? And when I talk our vision for the future, I'm talking Valley Metro and the entire valley of where we provide services. Currently today, we have 2 separate agreements, one for paratransit and one for ride choice. The contract for paratransit was a 5-year base contract that expires at the end of June of 2022. We contract with a broker for the ride choice program, and that base contract actually expires in December of this year. So knowing that both contracts have options for extensions, we sat down and met with the ATS committee, which is all of our jurisdictional partners. And so what do we want to do with these contracts? And it was almost unanimous that let's not just renew the contracts and keep operating with two separate companies. Let's go ahead and re-procure the services under a different type of a service delivery model. And so we went to the board, we made the recommendation, and the board accepted the recommendation. So right now we're working with all of our partners in the region in developing a scope of work on a new service delivery model. So service delivery model, what's that going to look like? So it's a pretty complicated service right now, but the biggest thing that we're going to change is we want one contract for one administrative, call it broker or call center, that's going to administrate both the Ride Choice program and the paratransit program. So if you're a customer, you're going to call one number. It goes to the same location. You can give your trip information, and the person taking the call information can say, you know, that trip's only 5 miles and you qualify for Ride Choice, and Ride Choice is done in your area, so I can schedule you that trip and it's only going to cost you $3. Or they can look and say, you know, that's a pretty long trip. It's probably going to be better on paratransit. So right now, both these programs are competing against each other, and we don't have any tool to make them work together. So our biggest plan is to get a broker in to where they're going to be managing both programs. Now, in this picture, we still have all of the ADA requirements that we need to make sure are met for the complimentary paratransit service. So in this new model down here at the bottom where it says dedicated paratransit provider, Valley Metro will be contracting directly with the paratransit provider. However, the same broker is going to be responsible for putting together the trip manifest, making sure service quality is up of all providers, whether it's Ride Choice or paratransit, and they're going to ensure efficiency of the system, which will not only reduce costs for the residents using it, but it's also going to reduce the cost for Valley Metro. And I always say that one first because really the people that will be experiencing the cost savings is all of our jurisdictional partners. I'm going to turn this back over to Christine now, where she's going to talk about some program conclusions and where she's going to recommend Goodyear go for the future.
Thank you, Tom. Before Goodyear, before we came to you to introduce the program, one of the concerns we had was whether we would have sufficient accessible vehicles. Obviously, these are our most vulnerable residents, and we wanted to make sure that they were going to be able to call and book a ride. There weren't that many accessible providers in the West Valley. It turns out that is what never actually materialized as an issue. Residents that need an accessible vehicle are getting an accessible vehicle, and they're choosing Ride Choice over Dial-A-Ride, which is paratransit. You don't ever have to worry about an accessible vehicle on paratransit. The vehicles come equipped to handle a wheelchair or any other mobility aid. On Ride Choice, this was a whole new animal, and we were just wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to meet that need, and we've been able to meet it quite well. Goodyear residents that can choose either Dial-A-Ride or Ride Choice are choosing Ride Choice. Tom mentioned earlier, one of the biggest selling points, despite the pandemic, I think this is going to continue to be the case, is the ability to have the vehicle to yourself. If you choose paratransit and need Dial-A-Ride, in many cases, you are actually sharing the ride with somebody else. So that is a big selling point for Ride Choice. And Ride Choice is more economical for the city. To further illustrate the savings, our intergovernmental agreement with Valley Metro that I'll be bringing to you in May for consideration, the paratransit cost, the Dial-A-Ride cost is actually $110,700, while the Ride Choice program is $22,600. It is a severe reduction in terms of the cost for the city. That's one of the reasons that Tom spent some time talking to you about the service model, because all of the cities are having a hard time being able to keep up with the cost of Dial-A-Ride. it really became a huge issue among all of the cities. Goodyear is in a good place because we're growing now. But, you know, when you're Mesa, when you're Phoenix, when you're Tempe, any kind of an increase in paratransit service, you don't have a choice. You have to provide that service. So Ride Choice has been a huge benefit for all of us across the valley. So we, even though this is not exactly the 2-year point, because of the budget process and the IGA that's going to be before you in May, I wanted to get in front of you sooner. Our 2-year anniversary will be in October, but we believe that there's sufficient evidence that the Ride Choice program is working in Goodyear. It's meeting a lot of need, and I think at the time when we first brought this forward, that was a huge issue. We had unmet need in Goodyear, and that was mostly because of our limited fixed route service. So we are requesting your authorization to continue the Ride Choice program in Goodyear. There will be a budget supplemental in your in the budget process. You'll be able to consider that, and then I'll be back in May with the intergovernmental agreement for you to consider that. We'll continue the service for another year, and we're more than happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you so much.
Questions? Barry?
First of all, thank both of you. I think this is a very good program, and I noticed on slides 6 and 7, it really looks like the Ride Choice has a reach for all of our citizens south up in Estrella, which is, we do have a retirement community up there, as you know, and so I think that's a great option. So I support that. I just have 2 questions. Obviously, the amount requested, is that enough? Are we building in an assumption anywhere in our request that post-COVID, as we come out of the pandemic, that you might have a higher increase?
I'm gonna make a comment about that, and then I'm gonna ask you for your opinion. The biggest challenge we've had in bringing this program forward is there's really no way to predict what your ADA demand is going to be. The kind of phone calls that I get are my mother, father, grandparents are limited due to some issue, whether it's vision, mobility, whatever, and there's no service in my area. And that's how we find out that we have somebody that needs service. Our website has been updated to show the Ride Choice program, and it gives folks a phone number to call. When I get the phone call myself, I always reach out to Valley Metro and give them a heads up and ask them if they would please handle this, because the staff is excellent at being able to help people navigate a system that is completely alien to them. A lot of people don't know how to ride a bus. So now we're taking somebody who's a little more vulnerable and expecting them to trust that they're going to be able to get a ride where they need to go. There's really no way that we can predict what that demand is going to be, but we have the resources available. When we first brought this forward to you, we were looking for your authorization for a ceiling of $200,000. We haven't even come close to that.
Okay.
The IGA that you'll see in May is $22,600, and that's assuming an increase. So it's been limited. You're right. We could see a bump after the pandemic, and we're going to be looking for that. But I think this guy's going to be looking at that a lot closer. So I'm going to ask him what he thinks.
We've done a lot of tracking right now on population growth in this area, and especially for the age group of 65 and older. And the 65 and older for the next 7 years is projected to grow almost 7% a year. After 7 years, we're going to start seeing that go downhill for a while. So what we're doing is we're drawing out 4 different scenarios of what could happen. Now, the benefit of the Ride Choice program is it's not mandated. There's no definition of what it should be. So if, in fact, it does drastically grow, we can be right back here and say, here's some options that we can adjust the program to help control some of the costs. But I think the bigger piece of it is, especially going to the new model, we're going to be trying to push as many of those $51 trips over to $19 trips, to where the program could double and financially, the picture is going to be about the same. The final thing I'll say with that is, as part of the eligibility process, as Christine said, the first bus ride is the hardest ride. People just don't know how to do it. So we have a very active fixed route travel training program. And anybody that goes through eligibility, we're saying, would you like to learn how to ride the bus? It's free. We'll meet you at your house. We'll do whatever it takes. So we have quite a few programs going to hopefully help control that cost increase in the near future.
And then my other question was, and I think you kind of answered it. One concern that I think we had was sometimes you can't get the Ubers or the lifts up to Estrella because it's kind of rural. Has there been any problems with the southern part? No problems?
I've heard nothing.
I'm going to answer that two ways. And the first way is, up to today, there has not been a problem.
Good.
Tomorrow, there's a national problem because of the pandemic. There was a lot of people that stopped driving Uber. They got unemployment. Uber is having a very difficult time recruiting drivers back now as people are starting to be more mobile. So we are starting to see longer wait times, but nobody's missing a trip right now.
Thank you.
If I could just say one more thing about that. I get a report every week from the Accessible Services Group, and that tells me how long people have waited on the phone, how many calls they've taken, any complaints we get immediately. I've seen nothing.
Good.
There's been nothing. And when you think about all of the potential impacts because of COVID, whether that's internal with the staff or the drivers, it just hasn't surfaced. It hasn't happened. So we're looking at a good thing and expecting it to continue.
Well, thank you. Great program. Thank you.
Any other questions? Molly?
Okay, I have several. On this map, I couldn't see, does either of these programs cover all of Goodyear?
The Ride Choice program does cover all of Goodyear.
But paratransit does not?
Paratransit is just the small area where the fixed route bus runs.
Okay, that's my first question. My second question is the trip comparisons. When you were saying that 3 out of 11, 9 versus 3 that need accessible vehicles for ride choice, and you're telling me we have 100 and, or what, we have 98 or 153 that are, they've been eligible for it. And when you add up all of the trips everybody took, it's over and above the amount of people that are eligible. So it must be the same people doing multiple trips. So we could have 20 people doing all these trips, even though we have 153 that are available.
Yes, and it came out to where 54 people are really have been active users over the 13 months.
And they're using the ride share versus paratransit.
There's only 10 people that are actually learned to use both services.
Well, but you just told me that paratransit doesn't go all through Goodyear, so you've got a big, huge portion of people that can't even use that service, let alone call them, because it won't go there.
We have one individual that goes to school in Tempe, and they live outside of the ADA service area, and they have take Ride Choice into the service area and then jump on paratransit to go all the way to Tempe. So people have used Ride Choice just to get to the bus or get to the paratransit program.
Okay. I'm really not convinced on this program just yet. I've been doing some talking to some of the other cities and then with Area Agency on Aging on how we are moving our seniors. They're the ones generally that are the handicapped, and they're the ones that generally have the vision problems and the mobility problems, and they're our most vulnerable population, and I'm just not sure that we have the right program yet for them. I think we're working on it, but I'm not sold, so it's okay.
And I can tell you, it's a program we can mold it any way.
I know you got to massage it almost every month, but I get it. I certainly understand that. So thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation.
My pleasure.
Any other? No?
I think to maybe help with some clarity, the customer who would choose paratransit or Ride Choice, they're basically the same person, same type of person.
Yes.
So there's not, someone who qualifies only for Dial-A-Ride, who can only use Dial-A-Ride, and then somebody else can. It's the same kind of person.
It's the same eligibility process. The one thing I will clarify, though, is there are some people that require door-to-door service that use paratransit because the driver's going to go to the door and help them. The ride choice driver is not required to do that.
Right.
The only difference, really.
So, I think, as we evolve in it, we see the cost of paratransit, which is, almost 3 times more than that. It seems to be the kind of the wave of the future. And as we have legal flexibility on creating a ride choice program, as opposed to strictly very regulated Dial-A-Ride services. So I think we've got the ability to massage this going forward, and every Valley community can have a potentially different type of ride choice program. So, I think public transit as we know it 10 years ago is going to be completely different a few years from now, let alone 10 years from now. So it's exciting to see us being able to move away, because I remember 10 years ago, ride choice wasn't even an option. And it was, well, if you don't live within, the distance of the fixed route, too bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice we've been able to adapt to move that forward as a regional system. From a perspective of, completely lost that train. Completely.
You know, that calms me.
I know, that makes you feel so much
yes,
better.
Yes.
I had something great to say too. I can't remember. No, I think we're headed in the right direction. The one thing I did want to mention is I think one of the barriers that a lot of folks have is actually getting to the mobility center to become eligible. If there's a way for us to have more local, and I forget what the term is, but
The mobile pop-up.
Out here, particularly in our city, and if that's something that we have to fund ourselves or whatever, but I think getting that takes a lot of the pressure off. I know even my mother-in-law, who I'm trying to encourage to get into the program, is like, well, I don't want to go all the way down there and have to go through, and it's an emotional barrier. So if we can get something where it's close to here and my wife can take her and walk her through that, I think it's a lot less intimidating for those that might need it, just as a way for us to move forward. But obviously, I'm super supportive of what we're doing across the board.
Joe?
Vice Mayor had mentioned something that's kind of brought to mind. The paratransit is people who need it from the door to the vehicle, correct? What happens to those that want ride share that need help from the door to the vehicle, and you say they're not required to do that, correct?
They're not required. I can tell you of our 14 providers right now, 8 of them, the drivers will get up and provide that assistance.
So there's a way to make sure that they have that service.
Yes, and individuals actually get to choose the provider they want to use. So I could say I want to use Uber's my favorite, and then behind that I want to use a different one. And so when we know people need that door-to-door service, we'll tell them these are the providers in your area that will do it. We can't require them to do it, but they will.
Okay, that's nice to hear. Thank you.
Laura?
I don't have any questions. I just want to comment and say thank you for the report. It's always so interesting. I think we've come a long way, and it's exciting that we are meeting an unmet need that existed previously. And I think we're going to see transportation as a whole be changing over the years, and so you'll continue to adapt. But this is a great way to meet needs, and hearing that further flexibility is just really credit. You're very customer focused and customer centric, and thank you so much for the good work you do.
Brandon?
Thank you.
Yeah, no questions at all, but I know this is a big need in our area here, so I appreciate all the work and the continued effort in this area, so thank you.
Any other council? I really enjoyed it, Mr. Young. I appreciate it. I live in a place now that I see people and I see the difficulty for any new things, and especially people that are not used to living in the West Valley. They're coming from other states, and they're very hesitant sometimes. And we all sit back and say, "Well, what's there to learn?" You know, but just handling the equipment, coming down from their apartments, going out, how long they're going to have to wait. And the big barrier is stepping up on anything. Yeah. Unless you have something that, rises. So to me, that is extremely important that we continue to advance with all kinds of illnesses, and because people are living longer and they're living with the illnesses now. And so it's very important. And they're very hesitant if they don't understand that. And so then they become housed, and they can become, they don't reach out.
Right.
So I appreciate that.
Mayor,
Thank you.
thank you for that comment, because, one of the things I always hope when we make these presentations is there are people watching, and it surprises me when I don't hear from people.
Mm-hmm.
I was so pleased that this whole program came about because a gentleman came to the council with his mother and made a statement.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's all it takes, and that's how we got here.
Right.
And she is riding Ride Choice.
Right.
I get a report that shows me, and every now and then I do look out and see if her address is there, and it is.
Nice to hear.
And I'm going to make a little plug before we stop. The Avondale Goodyear Transit Study is in the final stages. Our survey is on the website, and we would love people to participate in that survey to tell us more about where they need to go and how they need to get there. So a little plug for the survey, just because we're in the final weeks of the survey being open, and we'll be back in front of you to talk about the survey.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So item 2 is being postponed till a later date, and so we'll go directly to item 3.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Jenna Goad, Assistant to the City Manager, and tonight I'll be discussing the development of the FY 22-24 Strategic Plan. Tonight I'll briefly discuss the history of some of the work that's been done to date, as well as seek council consensus on the draft goals that have been developed. And then I'll briefly discuss the next steps in the strategic planning process. To give just a very brief history, the city is currently operating under the FY 19 through 21 strategic plan, which was adopted by council in 2018. The plan outlines the city's focus areas, guiding principles, and specific goals identified by council, which guide and prioritize staff's work during the 3 years of the plan. Staff has been providing twice annual updates on our progress towards the 16 goals in the current plan, and the most recent update was provided to council in January. The current plan will be ending on June 30th, and so we've been preparing to adopt a new plan for the next 3-year period, beginning on July 1st and ending on June 30th of 2024. Feels a little weird to say 2024. As part of those efforts, as council knows, we held a retreat in February where we reviewed the mission, vision, values, and focus areas and identified council's priorities for the upcoming 3 years. Some of the priorities that were identified were operational in nature, and those were shared with the appropriate departments and outlined in a follow-up memo that was provided to council in March. The 14 priorities that were deemed to be strategic were developed into SMART goals in cooperation with the relevant departments. I'm going to go through each of the goals in the proposed focus areas now, and I'll be looking for council consensus on the scope of the goals that have been proposed. And I do want to note that the directors are available in case council has any detailed questions about the technical aspects of the goals themselves. So the first focus area is fiscal and resource management, and there are 5 proposed goals in this area. The first is to develop a smart city master plan by FY22 that will leverage technology and data analytics solutions, resulting in the identification and prioritization of smart city projects. Excuse me.
I know, is there a problem?
No, where did these come from? The smart city plan, is this from our retreat?
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember Campbell, these were some of the issues that were identified as priorities when we had the retreat in February.
Okay, and then we can discuss them.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. So we would develop the plan, and then the identified projects would be submitted into the proposed FY23 CIP and budget supplementals for council's consideration at that time. The next proposed goal is to develop an enhanced performance measurement system. We would develop that during FY22 and then begin providing regular reports to the council by FY23. It is important to note that this would be above and beyond our existing efforts, including the performance measurements that are already in the annual budget book, the biannual strategic plan updates that I mentioned, the annual Valley Benchmark Cities Trends report, which council recently received, and the employee and citizen surveys that the city already conducts. The next proposed goal is to study and determine whether it would be financially and operationally beneficial to conduct a public safety training center and to present those recommendations to council by December of 2022. The next proposed goal is to conduct an employee compensation study in 2021 and to incorporate the results of the study into the FY23 budget development and to review or update our employee compensation philosophy according to council's policy direction. And the final proposed goal in this section is to increase the employee satisfaction score as measured in the biennial employee survey from 60% to 66%. And this is a continuation of a measure in our current plan where we made progress, but we didn't quite reach the goal of hitting 62% by the end of this year. And so we're now proposing to meet and then exceed that by 2024. And I'll pause real quick and see if there are any questions or comments about the goals proposed for this focus area.
Council, questions? Bill?
Can you go back a slide, please? Sorry. So the attached sheet that you included with this lays these out a little bit differently. Goal 1.1, which is the smart city, talks about develop and implement a smart city master plan, which means we are going to do smart city. And I question that activity. I don't recall us having a implementation discussion on smart city because it is such a monster to try to wrestle. And it's exceptionally expensive. So for us to say in our strategic plan that we are going to implement something, everything else that we've done is conduct a study to determine, kind of create that, should we be doing it? But Smart City was the only one that we said we're going to do it and we're going to implement it. And words mean something, so I'm.
Jen, I'm going to ask the city manager to respond in a moment. Excuse me, Bill.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. So I do think that's an excellent point. We talk in all the other areas about, or having the plan created and then talking about implementation. What might be slightly different in this category but perhaps it doesn't matter, is that we already do a number of things that make us a smart city. And so it's such a broad category that part of the study is to, put it into bite-sized pieces so that we have a work plan as to what does it mean to be a smart city? What have we already done that makes us a smart city? And then how do you proceed forward? So I think that's why we treated it slightly differently, because we do some things. We have a couple of electric vehicles in our fleet. We do have some smart meters and smart lights. And so it's for, in a lot of ways, putting the bookends around it and defining it as to what does it mean for Goodyear, and then how do we implement it. But certainly, if the feedback is to treat it more like we are the other ones and have the implementation phase just as part of our budget process, that is absolutely acceptable.
Well, I think from my perspective, then I'll turn it over to anybody else who wants to talk about smart city, because I've got a couple from this whole section. But I think understanding where we are today would be helpful. If we're kind of smart now and we want to get smarter, that's okay. What is that? What does that look like? What are we shooting for? The other thing that made me really nervous about reading this one is we actually talked about putting this into the CIP, which we have a lot of things. Now, we also have a lot of CIP available money. So I'm not saying that we can't do it, but when it comes to staff time, what can we actually accomplish? I don't know that I'm ready to commit to smart city dollars when there's a lot of other CIP projects that might be more beneficial to the average citizen as opposed to this concept of smart city, which we haven't had a discussion yet. So I'll end there on smart city, but I do request to come back to my other questions on here.
Well, I'm going to break in the conversation, Council, because I somewhat agree with what you've said. Because I believe when we spoke about it, when we spoke about the minimum, I mean, this is not, because if you look at that program, it's costly. And not just costly, it's time on your staff. And so that you can go out and put, we're a smart city. So sometimes I think that's the goal from the cities, rather than actually looking at, like you said, we do a lot. Recognize what we do that is considered smart, and do those things that are going to be effective. But just to be on the bandwagon, I don't think we need to be. But I think we need to be smart in what we do. Sherry?
Yeah, I guess I took it a little bit different as not doing a whole plan or a whole, I kind of looked at it like the traffic lights that we're talking about synchronizing is a smart city option.
Exactly right.
The water meters that help our citizens figure out what they're doing. So I was thinking, broadband, when we're talking about putting the conduit in for the programs, I think that's what I was thinking about. Am I off, or is that more where we were headed with this, or?
And I think that's part of the challenge, is it's such a broad topic. So
Yeah.
to your point, there are other strategic goals being proposed here that cross over. And whether it was a signal, which ended up as an operational conversation instead of strategic. But part of the challenge, and what we see a lot of our sister cities doing, is, working to put together the plan, similar to what we have as, transportation plan or a Parks and Trails master plan, to try to define what does that mean for us as we move forward, as a community. So, it's something that, I think would be beneficial for us. And the more the conversation progresses, I think if we were to be able to come back to council in a work session and present a plan, then I think it might make more sense for everyone as we then decide, are we taking it too far? Are we taking it just to, the right amount? Because absolutely there's an investment, and it competes with the other priorities of the city. So I think coming back with the plan first and having that as the goal, if that's acceptable, does make a lot of sense.
I agree with that. I think having a plan on how we're going to progress for the future, and then as we look through those bite-sized portions, then those can go in the CIP, like traffic signal correlation. Like you said, that became operational. I don't have a problem with that. I didn't take this as we're just going to jump in and do it all. I did take it more of just as an overview, and then we can take what pieces as we go through, what fits in at certain points.
So we'll tighten up the language.
Can we identify it in a definite manner? Do we have to say smart city? Is there something clever? that advanced technology, oh, I'm sorry, just a minute, let me finish. Advanced technology or something like that?
Well, we are part of the Smart Cities Consortium. So there's a regional effort that we are working with MAG and GPEC on. So that is the vernacular that's being used is the Smart City Consortium. Dan Cotterman sits as the representative for the West Valley on that initiative. So we are working hand in hand with the region on what does it mean to be a smart city. And, I'll be honest, there is some marketing involved in that. I know from GPEC's perspective, it helps them as we're looking to attract businesses that we're in a smart region. And what does that mean? So it's really, we're doing this at the regional level. What does it mean for Goodyear?
As long as we're going to do a race with the other cities, just so we can be top of everything. Joe?
Maybe it's just the wording. I was thinking as the discussion was going around, examine potential components that may be viable to pursue in a smart city endeavor, something along those lines. So you're not saying, you're looking at parts of the smart city operations, which you may want to look at, and then you come back with recommendations. Say, this is something possibly that we could, and then it would be up for funding with everything else that's in the capital budget. But I think maybe it's just the wording itself. Something along the lines of what we could possibly pursue that's viable for us, type of thing. So,
Yeah, and I think we could match it with some of the wording of the other items
Yeah.
that we've talked about
That's
studying.
Molly, did you have one?
Yeah, I just did not recall at our retreat council agreeing as a whole that we wanted to move forward on the smart city. So when I saw this in the goals, I was flabbergasted because it is very expensive. And we all haven't bought in on this. This is a big deal. Any master plan is a big deal, and it's something that is going to guide the city for years to come. And it takes a lot of staff time, a lot of resources, and a lot of money to implement it. So that was when I was questioning it when I even saw it come up on the slide because, I like the idea of what Sherry and Bill and Joe all have said is that I'd like to look into it or have a work session. But I'm not necessarily in favor of seeing it as an implementation in our strategic goals. There's other strategic goals I think that are just as important, that are doable. And I don't want to do something or put something in there that we can't accomplish reasonably.
Laura?
I would guess that for every person in the room or listening, there's a different definition of what a smart city is. And the reality is that there will be changes external to us that will impact us. I did go to a smart city seminar a couple of years ago. They said, will your city be prepared when a vendor drops off a fleet of autonomous vehicle taxis and things like that? What is going to be your parking and what's your, things like that. So things are going to happen external to just in society and transportation. And so we are a forward modern city. And I think this has to become part of our discussions about what it is, what it means to us, what things we're looking at. So I don't want to just throw it out and discount it because it does sound trendy or a bandwagon thing, because the fact is there's a lot of technology changes, a lot of how people, pandemic showed us, for how people work and things like that. So I just think we want to keep our eyes open and be connected to what's going on and see what makes sense for us.
I think it's a challenge of words.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is. And I think we are somewhat of a smart city by some of the things we do. So I guess it's how you put it together. And there certainly is an explanation that we can give to GPEC that still puts us within the realm of what is going on. And for those people who want to spend the extra money to speed up the process to be advanced, then that's fine. Maybe we'll learn something from them. And I agree with Laura said about, I went to one of those too, and that were very early on, and went to a demonstration of smart things, and they held it in, I don't know if it was a hotel, I couldn't remember, but every room you went into had technology in which they said smart city. So anyway, any other? Bill?
May I go on to the next one, I guess?
Oh, I don't know. Let me think about it. Go ahead.
All right, so the next, it's actually on this slide, is the performance measures piece. I looked at the definition, and Jenna and I had a great conversation about this, and I was I was okay with the way that it was worded on here, but then when I heard your description tonight, you talked about keeping the performance measures that we currently have in place and then building upon those and through our conversation, when we talk about performance measurement, what we are currently measuring isn't really measuring performance. And I'm concerned that we're going to leave those bad habits in place, and we're going to build on there. And so I guess I now want to know what are we really going to build a better mousetrap, or are we going to continue with the one that we have and go from there? And as you know, I can spend hours talking about performance measurement, but in order for us to be accountable to our residents, we really need to be able to show what we're doing. And then when we talk about the things that are happening, measure the things that really matter. And this is for the rest of the council. I'm looking at you, but the Valley benchmark data that we get is not really helpful in telling us really much of anything. If you've heard it once, you'll hear it again and probably 10 other times. My example that resonates with everybody is the fire department response time data. We track that, and all that tells us is how fast we get there. It doesn't tell us whether we know what we're doing when we arrive or what happens, and that's the stuff that matters. So Valley benchmark, that's what they're measuring. Turnout time, how fast you can get from the kitchen table or the bedroom to the fire truck, and then how fast you can drive the fire truck from point A to point B. We're missing the rest of the story, so I'm kind of curious to hear what's the real plan, what's the plan from that? Because what you've written has made sense.
Right. Yes, Mayor and Vice Mayor Stipp. No, I am contemplating that we would do a thorough review, look at everything that we're currently collecting, determine if it's useful or if it isn't. When I mentioned those others, I just meant to point out that it's not as if we're doing nothing. I didn't want to give the impression that it's brand new, but
Right.
that this would be above and beyond.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I just wanted to clarify. I do think it would be our intent, though, to continue to participate with Valley benchmarking because of, again, the regional nature of it. I think that the budget measures, for example, would likely be replaced with something that hopefully you would find more beneficial, to clarify.
Joe?
Yeah, I sort of understand where the vice mayor's coming from. But for me personally, I remember when I was doing my MBA, one of my statistical class was to look at response time and how it related to those that were having a heart attack. And my conclusion was they could save money and gas on some of their calls because they were going to, by the time they got there, the actual result would not have been a positive one. So I tend to agree that response time is important, but I also think that the results tie it to, what the results was as that time slips away. Maybe if they'd been there another minute earlier, they might have saved that individual. So that's where I'm kind of coming from, not just the time itself, but the follow-up and what the result is, but that's all part of it.
Right. If you measure cardiac survivability, just in that example, that answers that question for you. But the response time itself does not.
No, but it's part, to me, it's part of that.
Correct. It's a
overall
part of it.
piece.
Exactly.
Any other comments? Just a thought that I had. So in city government, there's many things to performance measures. I just think about when citizens write us a letter and need an answer, isn't that performance? Is this all technical when we do this? So is it going to be on how fast cars go or how slow they go? Or, I mean, is it that kind of structure, or do we actually get into the human side of it? Because much of our work here is through the public. And so how do people know that we're doing what we say we're doing? They don't know. We constantly tell them we always answer back, we do this, we do that, but that's because that's what we answer. But we don't have really the written or accounting or facts about some of the things we do. So that was my question. Is that part of it? Or when you do performance measures, is it really how fast staff does things, how complete the report is? I mean, is there a humanistic side to it?
Well, and I'll jump in. Certainly the measurement part of performance measures is that you have to have something tangible to measure, to compare to. But the human side, Mayor, I believe, like when you do your citizen satisfaction survey, that is measuring how people feel about their local government, about the trust level with local government. So, but it's still something we can use to measure. It's a measuring stick, you know, but certainly anecdotally, we love it when we get, you know, the compliments and the thank yous and the appreciation from our residents. I mean, that's certainly, you know, very heartwarming. But when we talk about performance measurement, it does tend to be the more numerical, you know, measuring side of that equation, but we can do it through other employee satisfaction surveys, resident satisfaction surveys as well.
I think it could be something else with that, but I'm not going to go further than that. Brandon?
I don't want to keep going, but I had a question. So for these benchmarks or for these KPIs or these measurements that you're doing, they're going off of Valley Cities benchmarks. That's how you're building them off of. What's the standard? Are you going on industry standards, city standards? I'm just curious is it something we're creating on our own? Are we moving forward? If we hit the benchmark, are we challenging it later for the next year? Just keep pushing ourselves for better performance, or are we just staying at whatever the benchmark is industry benchmark that we're looking for?
Right. Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Hampton. So as part of the performance measures in the budget book, we do set a target for where we want that measure to go in the upcoming year. So yes, I absolutely envision that when we go through and develop those measures, determine which ones we want to track more closely and more often, that we would be setting a target or a goal and then reporting on whether or not we met that goal. So I think that would be something we would be developing, you know, here specific to Goodyear. Valley Benchmark Cities right now doesn't have a target component. It just is a report of all the city's data. It shows the median numbers, but there's no target that's set on a regional level.
And I guess I'm used to the public. These measurements are usually tied to performance and how people get paid. So how does it go for, meeting those requirements? Just it's the right thing to do, and that's how we are motivating people to want to meet those requirements? Or is it, I'm just curious how that works, how that hook is in there.
Sure, Council. Am I understanding, was your question about how that would be tied to employee performance?
Yeah, because these measurements are all based, you're tracking it, and then you're measuring it, and then it's just, hey, we made it, we met our goals, we met our performance measurements, good job. I'm just curious, and I'm used to take all those measurements in the private world, and then that's how you get your payout in your performance review type time period. You have to meeting everything to make sure that you're actually that they did well enough. So I'm just curious how we do it here in the public world. That's all.
It's certainly, there's an accountability. Our department directors are, involved in the tracking, and they know what their goals are. So there's an accountability function. We do not have a reward system or tied to compensation. So it's purely for accountability purposes and making sure that we're a continuously improving organization. So that we're, tracking things that are meaningful and important, and, striving to be the best that we can be. But to your question directly, it's not tied to compensation.
Yeah, I didn't think so. That's what I'm used to. So, being a really big deal. So, okay, thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you very much. You have the
Okay.
rest of the.
I'm going to move on to the next focus area then, unless there were any questions. No, okay. So there are 4 proposed goals in the economic vitality focus area. The first is to initiate and complete a citywide broadband connectivity assessment by June of 2022. The assessment would allow the city to identify and ensure high-quality internet access, recognizing that high-speed internet is now essential for daily living of our residents, and of course, it's also very important for our businesses as well. The second proposed goal in this focus area is to develop an update to the city's general plan and then submit that update to the voters for their consideration in the fall of 2024. The third proposed goal in this area is to assist in the creation of 4,500 new jobs, and with 10% or 450 of those being in the targeted office sector, and that would be by June of 24. And the fourth proposed goal is to enhance the city's role as a regional destination for shopping, dining, and entertainment by increasing the number of businesses reporting in the restaurant and entertainment tax categories by 10%, again by June of 2024. So does council have any questions or comments on the proposed goals in this section?
Smiling. We're all smiling a little bit.
Let Brandon go first.
Okay.
Just
Wally?
come around the road.
I see everybody kind of go, yes. Wally?
Oh, okay, so I have two real quick questions. The general plan that we have now is expired, quote, in 2025, right?
Yes.
And that's why
That it's
we're
due for.
talking now. Where are we on a Parks Master Plan? When is the next Parks Master Plan due? Is it before 2025, or is it a goal we need to put on? Because now that we're developing more in West Goodyear, and we're developing up in I say Rainbow Valley, but that's up where the fire station is. We need to really know where we're going to put these parks, and it's changing the landscapes. Oh, hello, Nathan.
So we did
Sorry.
I think we have
We did
someone
call
that's
a
going
friend.
to answer that.
Sorry.
Mayor, Councilmember Campbell, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update is actually scheduled to begin in July of the upcoming year, and we anticipate that'll take about 6 quarters to complete from start to finish. So we'll be working on it over the next couple of years.
So we don't need to put it in the strategic plan then?
That would be up to Mayor and Council and the city manager.
The component of it, I believe.
Julie?
I mean, you certainly could, but
I think that's a big goal. But I mean, that's just my opinion, because I'm so pro parks.
Can I weigh in on that?
I'm sorry. He probably did.
Yes, Bill?
So I think there's and I'm speaking from the consultant perspective.
Okay.
The general plan update is a huge multi-departmental lift.
Right.
The community outreach and all the rest of that, which rises it to the city strategic plan level.
Mm-hmm.
The Parks Master Plan is it's the Parks Department. So it's more operational. So if you'll notice that there's something in here about one of the operational things that we talked about was updating the economic development strategic plan. That's operational. This Parks Master Plan is essentially their strategic plan. So it stays operational as opposed to rising to the city council level. Doesn't mean it's not going to get done. It just doesn't come in here because it's not multi-departmental. That's why.
So, yeah, well, I know that, Bill. I understand all that. But if we're going to be planning parks, should it not be in the master plan?
Yeah,
Should it
and that
be
master
put in
plan then informs the CIP.
But not the Parks Master Plan. The master plan we're going to talk about redoing. The master
Oh, the general plan?
The general plan. Those parks need to be identified somewhere.
Well, I think that
So-
informs the general plan.
Typically, the general plan and the Parks Master Plan, we try and
Mary?
make those, we try to integrate those.
Okay, as long as we can get it in there, that's the only thing I love that we're moving ahead on the master plan because 10 years flies by. And we need to be prepared for the next 10 years. And we need to include all of our parks that we plan to do. Because who knows, maybe we're going to do another recreation center somewhere. Or another library or something.
Don't pass out.
And if just to add on to that, I think that the fact that it goes to the residents for a vote also adds to, that
Sure.
complexity. But I wanted to just point out maybe something that feels a little inconsistent, but we had talked about. You'll see in the last section that we are proposing that a library master plan be included in the strategic update. And the thought process there is one, we don't have one, and
Right.
right now we work with the county. And so that felt like a different project. But, again, I think subject to this conversation isn't necessarily as black and white as, as we might like it to be. And so certainly this is meant to be, a list of council priorities. It's a way to communicate those to the community. But to Vice Mayor's point, that is something that this department will be focused and working on, whether it's in or out of this plan. So, certainly just know that the master plans we have in place at the city inform the general plan.
Any other questions?
Me? No, they got it all. Thank you.
Brandon?
I think the theme of my question is going to be achievable. The creation of the 4,500 new jobs, is that achievable, or is that a hard target to meet, or is that an easier target to meet? And then along with that question is, do we want to break it down even more? I mean, obviously we want higher paying jobs. I think that's why we went to 10% office space, but do we need to break it down even more? Do we want other sectors we want to focus on as well, as opposed to warehousing or higher amount of people, but less income for the people that are there? That's the first question. I got a couple of questions too.
And if you're interested, we do have our economic development director with us who can maybe engage with you on that conversation if you'd like.
Coming forward now.
And then
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and the council member Hampton. We believe that the 4,500 net new jobs, and those would be the net new jobs that the department touches. There are certainly businesses that come into the city that don't need our support or assistance, and we are not counting those in that net new jobs. And we do believe that it is achievable for a variety of reasons. In economic development, they say product brings projects. And so one of the reasons we focused on the office jobs is because we have 100,000 square feet of Class A office coming out of the ground. And it's very important for us to show the developer as well as the development community that we have the workforce and we can certainly fill that building. So that was one of the reasons we concentrated on that 450, that 10%. Certainly in our internal plan, we count all of our pillars of opportunities. And so internally, for example, we count, distribution, logistics and distribution, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, retail. It is all part of our focus in terms of our attraction efforts. But we did call out the net new jobs for office just simply because we want to show the development community as well as support our developer, our partner on their Class A office.
Okay. So do you think we should add 10% for other things too, or do you think the focus should be more on the more on just the office? I'm just curious, or if 4,500 is good, or if 6,500 is good. So I'm just curious with that.
Well,
I'm sure you did analysis, and I'm sure that's why the number's there. So I just want to make sure if it's a stretch goal or if it's going to be really easy to knock out of the park.
Well, we believe that we believe it's achievable. We also believe that there could be some challenges that come up in terms of us attaining that. So internally, we do have this as part of our goal. So if you break this down into 3 years, I believe that's 1,500 net new jobs each year. And then something that we have not shared with the executive team, so I need to apologize to Deputy City Manager Winnett, is internally we have stretch goals. So this is, we know that our goal is 1,500 net new jobs each year. And then internally, for each of the categories, we have an internal stretch goal. So we do believe we can meet that, but we are not going to stop by just saying, oh, we've met it, we're done.
Yeah,
but rather we know and understand the importance of this to the council. So we have identified some internal stretch goals.
Okay. No, thank you. Yeah, I don't doubt you're not going to stop. You're going to shut the doors as soon as you meet the goal or anything. I definitely think you're going to keep moving. I was just curious what that felt like to you, the 4,500. And then the general plan, when are we actually starting that process? It should be really soon we should start that process because it's like a 1.5 year process before and then elections. So when do you foresee that getting all the citizens and putting everybody in place for that?
Yeah, Councilmember Hampton, just very briefly, I believe the intent is to start the process in July of this year, to hire a consultant by the end of the calendar year. The next step would be to appoint an advisory committee around April of 2022. and then go through the steps to develop it and then bring it to council, I believe in May of 2024 for council's referral to the voters.
Okay. And then the 2.4, enhance the city regional destination for shopping, dining, and entertainment. This might be, sorry, I might have had Laura sit down too fast, but I guess how are we, I'm sure, I like it broad, so you can do whatever you want to do to make that happen, but is there a place for, like, are we looking at a tourism type component, like some of our neighboring cities have started doing, or I want to leave it open to whatever you guys need to do to make it happen, but I'm just curious what that looks like, if there's going to be any component like that to bring more tourism to the West Valley or to Goodyear, or rely on our other partners in the region, or because I obviously want I know that's a big part of our city. We definitely want more shopping, dining, and entertainment.
So this goal does focus on that tax reporting category. So it's specific to these businesses locating in Goodyear. I think tourism is probably a different conversation that would not necessarily be covered under this item, because this goal focuses on the number of businesses that are reporting under that category. So every time you add a restaurant, you'd be increasing that category by one. Now, if you happen to lose one, now you've moved back to goals. So it's looking at a net new number of people reporting in that category, which means businesses have located within our within our city walls. I think tourism is not reflected as one of our strategic plan goals. It hadn't come up yet.
Okay. No, I would just, when it says enhance cities roles at regional destination, I guess that's where I was getting the tourism the destination portion. And I guess how you're seeing that is that bring more restaurants so people will want to come to the city for those destinations. So, okay.
Correct. We talked in the strategic plan about being the region's destination for these items, which means drawing them, from neighboring communities. Tourism, you tend to see, is coming from perhaps even out of state, and so it has a different flavor to it. Certainly, if that's a topic that council wants to explore, more than willing to do so. But I don't think this category is covering that.
Okay. I just want the clarification. Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
Laura?
Regarding the regional destination, I was curious if we have targeted areas for commercial growth. It seems that there's a lot of pressure to rezone things more to multifamily or single family rentals. And so as we are casting a vision for creating the shopping, dining, and entertainment, is part of this process going to target areas where we think that commercial growth will be viable?
So I can speak to, because we're nearly ready to present council with my recommended budget for next fiscal year, and you'll see that there's a supplemental that we're including through the Economic Development Department to do a study, and it's a branding study, but it's more than just a branding study, and it's looking at our entertainment district area, which is inherently around that McDowell, and looking at what it could be, how to brand it, how to activate that area into what we believe it has the potential to be. So I think that's speaking to that comment, but it is restricted. At this point, that study would be restricted to just that area.
Okay, and as we're growing out west and certainly farther south, and just are we looking to preserve some land for that type of growth? We're certainly getting the density, and there will be people looking to dine and shop, and so I just don't want to give it all away. I realize that commercial's changing, but I think we need to keep an eye for what's viable.
So would that look like a study, or I guess I'd be interested in council conversation on that topic. Sherry?
There we go. I think I'd like to see a work session. I know several years ago we brought some people in who did some of the commercial, and it was a really good conversation, the issues about, what we want realistically what we can get and why some of these corners haven't developed. Are we saving the wrong ones? I think that would be a great conversation to have as we move forward. I love the idea of a study of the McDowell because that's kind of coalesced to where this is all going. And some of the areas that we have reserved, we found out that nobody wants to go to. So I think as we grow to the west, it would be great to have some experts and have that discussion on what areas are best to stay. What are we looking for? What kind of ingress and egress? What's around them? So I know they brought, I don't know, it was many years ago. Do you remember?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's,
And I found that very helpful, at
was
least I
very
did.
helpful.
You know, to kind of see, you know, and I know there's been a lot of change after post-pandemic world's going to be a lot different with everything. So I think I would like to, I'd find that educational for me anyway.
I'm going to add something to that. I think that one of the hesitation is, and I just recently had conversation with a developer, okay? And it was about, you know, residents as well. And they, you know, they talked about reasons why that housing needs to be there and housing, and of course, then I brought up, you know, small restaurants, sweet shop, you name it. And so I think that's our mountain to climb, because I don't think that they want to put that in and spend the money. I really see a hesitant from them, so I kept saying it's a neighborhood. I know the location is near, you know, this and near that, but it's a neighborhood, and can't we think about looking at our neighborhoods and bringing people together with a business, you know, there. So I don't know how the city manager feels, but or Dev, but I don't see a lot of enthusiasm. I see more security. We'll build the homes, they'll sell, you know, we'll be able to financially manage that. This is not a criticism of them personally, but it is of the market. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
Julie?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. And we've talked quite a bit about land use and, you know, apartments and our growth trajectory. And I think that, you know, I'm continuously reminded, you know, we're still a relatively young city. And even though we're hitting our 75th anniversary and our 3,000 residents, we did a presentation today with economic development, and we're the same size today that Gilbert was in, I think it was 1989. Yeah. You know, we're a good 20, 30 years behind, you know, some of the communities, you know, Chandler and Gilbert, that we and our residents want to have those amenities of some of those, you know, cities. I mean, even the city of Surprise is twice the size of Goodyear, you know, so when when the private market is looking at a corner in one of our neighborhoods and saying, you know, they're in it to make money. You know, they're looking at their, you know, balance sheet and saying, you know, is this the location that we're going to, you know, to be the most successful? We talked to our residents up in Estrella Mountain, and they're like, you know, why won't X, Y, and Z business locate in Estrella? We'd love to have them. And it's like, but if you draw a little circle around Estrella as compared to our McDowell corridor, you know, where's the likelihood that they're going to make the most money? I mean, that's the whole basis of our economy. Well, yeah. So, you know, I think they're great conversations, and I think we do need to continue to have them. And if, you know, consultants or studies can help us get there and better understand our market and where we are today, I think those are all. I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation for Goodyear as we continue to grow and mature as a community.
Yeah, I've had that conversation a lot about, like, with my neighbors up in Estrella, why don't we have that? And the conversation a lot of the times is like, people aren't going to drive 10 miles from the McDowell corridor up the mountain unless it's something really, really special, whereas you might be driving down the mountain, and it's because there's more people down there. So,
and there's still land.
Yeah.
We still have available spots.
Yeah, no, I've had that conversation. I just laughed when you said that, especially when somebody wanted another Harkins up there. Just keep that in mind.
In time. In time.
Bill?
You know, I think as part of this conversation, there was an article that came out today that talked about 80,000 retail stores will close within the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. That's existing businesses today, and how this pandemic has changed buying habits and online, you know, sales and whatnot. And if we think about, when we first moved out here, and I think, and those of you that have lived here for a long time, would you ever have thought in your wildest dreams that Paradise Valley Mall would be bulldozed and turned into there was never, that was, I think, farthest thing from anyone's imagination, and that's where we are today. And I think that really is that's our challenge. And I remember the conversation, and I keep going back to, I think it was Nathan that came and did it, or there was a combination of 2 or 3 of them that talked about it. And maybe it's something that we look at after this study is done on that one corridor. Maybe there's an opportunity to leapfrog into something else from there, because we've spent, in the time that we've been a council, we had 2 retail studies. We've had, good Lord, we have spent the money on consultants to look at this, and here we are today. And I think
Still looking.
when we started those, we never envisioned the e-commerce that we have today. So, it's an interesting look at the landscape.
Well, when I early on when they did one of those studies, they said we had too much shopping. Yeah. That's where we've come from, too much shopping in areas, and so you're absolutely right on this. Joe?
Yeah, but I agree that, the retail industry is changing and a lot of things are closing, but people still want to get out, you know what I mean? So I still think there's a lot of opportunities when you look at some of our corridors for high quality upscale restaurants, maybe some more along the entertainment side. I know they don't make a whole lot of money, but even some places where you get some theater dinner type of deal going. But I know people still want to get out, but there's easier ways to shop now than there ever been. But it still doesn't mean quality restaurants, quality entertainment, those type of things that maybe we can fill into some of these corridors to get people out and about. That was our whole idea of having that meeting place there that we're getting built right now. So you have the park in front, you can have a variety of events going on, maybe a little music festival as well. But the point is that gets people out and about meeting their neighbors. So I still think that's there. It may not be your typical, retail establishment, but getting out among your neighbors and just getting out in the outdoors, I think still there. It's just a matter of figuring out what will fit and what will draw the people to it.
And financing. Yeah, big one. Any other comments?
So if I can just recap that conversation, I believe I'm hearing that this goal is probably okay for what it is, but understanding that there's a lot of work to do in this area. We have the study that's coming back actually at the end of this month on that one parcel of land we've talked about. Then ECTEB with this other project working on that in a whole entertainment district, and we'll continue to have the conversation. But I don't hear that we're looking to add an additional or expand this goal. Just wanted to confirm. Okay, thank you.
Everybody's satisfied? Thank you.
Okay.
There are 2 goals proposed under the sense of community focus area. The first is to implement a system to proactively monitor neighborhood quality of life issues through social media, to regularly report on the issues that are identified, and to bring any priority or reoccurring issues to the attention of the applicable departments so they can be further evaluated or addressed. The plan would be to implement that system this year in 2021 and begin reporting on a monthly basis by the end of the year. And the second proposed goal in this section is to complete an evaluation of the recycling program due to the unstable market, and to make recommendations to council that would support community and fiscal goals. The recommendations would be presented to council by June of 2023, and any approved changes or new strategies would be implemented by June of 2024. Are there any questions or comments about those 2 in this area?
Molly?
I'm sorry, I really have a question about creating a system to proactively monitor neighborhood quality of life issues through social media. You get on my social media with Pebble Creek and everybody's bitching about everything. So that's not, yeah, I'm serious. And then you get on Nextdoor and then you've got people complaining about everything. How in the world are we going to pay a staff person to go online all day and read Facebook and Nextdoor? I mean, what are y'all trying to achieve? What's the bottom line here that we're trying to What do we want to know that we don't know?
Sure. I think that the goal here is to be able to identify if there are issues that are coming up repeatedly that are receiving a lot of attention or activity. So it's one thing if there's one comment about a particular issue, but if there's 1,000, it would be very helpful to know that. It also gives you the ability to track the favorability, if you will, so you can look and see if there's changes over time. Which is also very helpful. So for example, you can look at a particular issue. So there might be, I'm going to make this up, but maybe barking dogs is a big issue. We would be able to see that bubble up through the frequency that it's being mentioned by our residents on social media. So we would be able to identify it as an issue, then consider what steps or things the city might do to work to address that, and then be able to see if resident sentiment has changed once we've implemented those initiatives, if that makes sense.
And just to further expand, there's actually services that exist that are available in the marketplace. And so we would be doing an analysis of those products and which one might work best for Goodyear. So some of our sister cities, they basically pay a fee, and there is a service that monitors the social media and then sends you monthly reports, and it tells you kind of the temperature of what are the most common topics that are being discussed. It's actually quite interesting. I've been able to review a couple of the reports from that come out of this service. And so I think if we were to do this, we'd probably want to do it as a trial, see if it's beneficial. There is one large issue with the service, and that is the Nextdoor platform is closed and doesn't allow these types of monitoring services. And so you're getting pieces. It's never going to tell you the entire story, though, because of the way the Nextdoor platform exists. But we've been watching, and some of our sister cities have found the reports beneficial. So, for example, say that there's an unfortunate PD issue that happens in your community. You can go out and see, is our proactive communication addressing the issues? Are there still unanswered questions? And so we believe that for what we're seeing the cost, that it would be a worthwhile to see. I mean, social media has become so much a fabric of our daily lives that to be able to, and I say proactive, and maybe that's not the right word because it's already existing out there, but right now, I might happen to see something on my Facebook page. You may happen to see something on Nextdoor, and it's kind of just us talking, going, hey, have you heard this? Or this seems to be a big issue. And it's a way for us to try to, in a more methodical way, find out what our community is talking about.
Is there any thought of working directly with the HOAs and ask them what their issues are with the homeowners so that you have a feel on how that is working? Because so many of the complaints on Nextdoor are HOA issues, which we can't do anything about, and I understand that, but there's gunshots and there's kids at 4:30 in the morning rattling the doors and ringing doorbells and all of this, but it's all over the city. So when I see almost anything like that, if it has anything to do that our PD should know, because I know they don't see what I see, I send it to Lisa and say, look what I saw today. Look what I heard today. Look who sent this to me today. I know I drive them nuts, but I don't want them out of the loop because sometimes those things can fester up and really turn a neighborhood upside down very quickly.
And I think that's exactly the point. As to our relationships with HOAs, we certainly have our good neighbor alerts and such, but perhaps there's more we can do in that arena.
Yeah,
too,
I just think it'd be really nice. And it opens up a line of communication directly to the city with the HOAs, which that's been some of the concern that has been expressed to me as I have been visiting HOAs recently, and they're saying, we never hear anything from the cities, and I just think it would be nice if we put them on our radar as well.
Thank you for that feedback.
So, and then we can push through what we need them to let the residents know as well. So, this is my
Bill?
thought.
I think we answered the question. There's an issue about Glendale's annexation of the FedEx thing that has popped up that Goodyear is being blamed for, where we if we're monitoring these things, can proactively get out ahead of it.
Yeah.
Even to the point of, I think maybe it's worth an exploration of using the HOA as a conduit in addition to those things that we can't get out. That if we communicate with Palm Valley 5 HOA that this is really what happened, or here's the rest of the story, and they blast that out to everybody, we try to at least keep some of that going, because it just gets out of control. And I think what we saw during the charter change pieces, I sent one and had this conversation with the manager about it. There were 240 some comments about the election, and 240 something of them were wrong. And nobody was there to correct the record, so to speak. And even if we get this half right, we're still halfway in the right direction.
We're ahead.
So I think this is a good one.
Sherry?
Well, you kind of answered my question, because no, I was going to ask if there's an algorithm or something, because that would just be an awful job just to sit there and read all those. Because unfortunately, like Wally says, it does kind of debase. A lot of these conversations might start out with a really legitimate issue, and then it just goes sideways really quickly. So I think that's a really good idea. I know there's like the issue with the water at Luke that really got out of hand quickly, because then it was Goodyear, because same water come. And so getting some of those issues would be really good to get in front of. I think that's a good idea, but I'm glad there's some sort of algorithm. And I don't know if that includes some of the next door, because a lot of our neighbors now have the cameras and they start posting on the next door. I don't know, not next door, I guess the Ring. I don't know where that goes.
Oh, the Ring app.
Yeah, I don't know if that goes into the algorithms, what you're getting, or
That one I'll have to check on. I'm not familiar, but I understand that, those are becoming larger social networks.
yeah, because then
as well.
people start making comments on those back and forth. So, and then I had a question on the second piece, the recycling. What is the status of our recycling plan right now?
So currently, through our contract with Right-of-Way Disposal, RID, there are 2 trucks that are picking up, and we're encouraging our residents to continue to sort their trash and recyclables. But at this moment in time, they are still both going to the landfill.
I was sorting, and then someone told me I didn't have to sort, and I wasn't sure. So
We certainly encourage that folks don't change the habits, because we believe that the pandemic is what has led to the current issue immediately, but this goal is also recognizing that the market is changing with recyclables, and we need a longer term view at this as well.
Okay, on that subject, so the goal is to complete the evaluation of the recycling program, develop recommendations by the end of FY23, which is June of 2024. I don't think we can wait that long. That's 3 years from now. FY23 starts July 1 of 23. No, I'm sorry.
Yes, or
One more year, 1 year. I'm 1 year off.
22?
Starts in 22 and goes to June of 23. I think we got to get on this faster than that. We either recycling's going to stay or recycling's going to go. And I don't think we should wait that amount of time. Now it may be a staff capacity issue. I don't know, but I hate the idea of us pretending that we're recycling when we're not.
You should live where I live.
Oh, I know. You should hear the discussion in my house every Sunday night. And my brothers and my sisters. So.
And yeah, thank you for that comment. Recycling is a really complex subject, right? And really it's really, people have different perspectives, of the value of recycling. We do have citizens that see recycling and tie it specifically to its benefits to the environment. And certainly there are many of those benefits attached to those programs. But we also have the reality of the economics of recycling. And so the market is changing, and we know it's going to be changing over the next several years. The reason why we had sort of created a more extensive timeline is to just get a sense of where the market is going and be able to, if needed, adapt the behaviors of our citizens to where we get the program to be sustainable or not at all. I think that the not at all answer would come a lot sooner than the implementation of a long-term strategy that is sustainable. We could adjust the schedule as needed. Yeah.
I hear that. I mean, I think that's the unfortunate part, that I think the reality of it probably is recycling will not exist 3 years from now the way that it did 3 years ago. What we do with the recycles, et cetera. And I think that's the state of the world economy. So if the recommendation, I'm not going to, climb the hill on 2023, but if there's a way to get an answer sooner, if the answer appears, I think over time, if the answer appears inevitable, we ought to just move this timeline up.
Fair enough.
But if it doesn't, then write it out.
Any other questions? All right, you have the floor.
Okay. All right, and finally, there are 3 goals proposed under the quality of life focus area. The first is to study the human and social services needs of Goodyear residents, including senior services, childcare, youth programs, education, homelessness, affordable housing, and mental health, to assess the current service availability and then make recommendations to council on priority service enhancements. Then we would be looking to initiate that study in 2022 and present results to council by March of 23. The next goal is to complete an evaluation of public transit options, identifying unmet needs, evaluate funding requirements, and make recommendations to council by June of 2022. And this effort obviously would be informed by the ongoing Avondale Goodyear Transit study that's currently underway through MAG. And the final goal is to conduct a library operational assessment and feasibility study, and then develop a library master plan that outlines recommendations for current and future library services, and to bring those recommendations to council for consideration by June of 24.
I know that we have this discussion all the time, but having our own service in Goodyear that goes around to all the neighborhoods and to the companies, and some of the cities do have that, and I know it's really costly to develop one, but it's one of those that I think we have to have it in mind and start maybe at least semi-planning, or getting the numbers of what it's going to cost us, even though we're not going to get it right now. And we don't do that at all in Goodyear. And there's some other cities that have a tax on it. They've mentioned we should have one. So anyway, but it is a concern that a normal city has some kind of transportation around their city. So just put that out. And I know it might not be the time for it, but I still think it's needed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I cut that conversation off? Just go ahead, keep going.
That's fine if there's no other questions or comments about the proposed goals, then I'll just close real quickly by thanking council very much for the feedback. The next steps is we will take the discussion here tonight and also the feedback that council provided on the mission, vision, and values at the February retreat. And we'll bring the full strategic plan package to the council in May for council to consider adoption. And I do just want to note real quick that council will receive a final report on the outcomes of the FY 1921 plan goals, the current plan goals in August. And then going forward, staff will continue to provide those twice annual updates on the new plan goals. And you could expect to receive the first report on those in about February. So,
Bill?
Are there elements of the prior strategic plan that are carrying over into this new one? Or will we have achieved everything?
Vice Mayor, there's one goal related to the employee satisfaction score where we didn't quite meet what we were trying to do by this year. And so we've retained that for the new plan and looked to increase it even more by 24.
But everything else will have been met.
Oh.
There's no other projects carrying forward.
Vice Mayor, I will say we did not and we won't meet every single one of the goals that was in the current plan. For example, there was a goal related to attendance at Parks and Rec events, I believe. Due to COVID, we didn't see the increases there that we would have. So there are a few that we didn't quite meet, I believe mostly because of the impact that COVID had on our events and programming.
Can we just get a simple list of what wasn't met and what's not carrying forward? Because some of those you go, yeah, okay, that was a great goal, and there's others that we may collectively have said, that's kind of important. We'd like to see it continued and revised and put back in. So we just get a short list of what that is instead of the.
Yeah, we can include that in an upcoming manager memo so that you have that available. Another one that comes to mind is the rec campus. We had certain programming goals that we had wanted to accomplish, and with the actual opening, that one wasn't met as well. So they tend to be more that type of goal. So
that's what I'm thinking.
We'll remind you of what they were. So
yeah, that's all.
Perfect.
Joe?
Excuse me. To me, would be helpful in that satisfaction survey for the employees. You probably needs my memory refreshed, but how you plan on increasing it from 60 to 66? What is the implementation strategy to get there? Training, whatever it is. I would like to see those steps on how you plan on getting there.
The work plan
Yeah, the work
underneath
plan
that goal?
Yeah, the work plan to get to that goal. So it's probably out there. I just need my memory refreshed. So.
Well, in fairness, it will be refreshed because what we had done didn't get us all the way there. Certainly, I think our core value journey is going to have an impact on that. But certainly, once we have that work plan put together, we'll share that with council.
Thank you.
Any other? All right. I'm going to ask council about comments and things before I close this meeting and start the other one. And then I think we'll take, after I call the special meeting, is it okay then we take a break? All right, good. So does council have any comments or reports or current items? Yes. Councilman Basilio.
A couple things. I had a chance to talk to Larry. I know he's been working on the Ciroc on the Meals of Joy, and I guess there's a lot of meals going out to seniors out there. And I know you're working on it as well.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You look at our community and you'd be surprised how many seniors really need a good meal.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about 1,000 meals weekly they're making.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know about what yours on, but it's just amazing. And the second piece I just want to add is something I'm really excited about is I get to do the welcoming remarks at the Phoenix Chorus Gala event that's being held here in Goodyear Saturday. Yeah, that's their fundraiser, the Phoenix Chorus. They have a big gala. It's going to be held at the, I guess, the big hangar that they have out there. So it's the first time there's going to be a public event.
Nice.
And it's their major fundraiser. I promise, Mayor, it won't be as easy to grant. I'll come up with something more appropriate.
Please do.
Yeah, since this is a formal occasion, but I'm really looking forward to that. So, and it's one of their big fundraisers to raise money for the Phoenix Children's Chorus. So I'm really excited about that, and that's going to be Saturday. So,
Well, congratulations. That's nice. Laura? Sorry, Lower
That's
Tunnel.
You were looking at me, I know.
I'll get your
I
name.
want to have a shout out. Is Nathan still here for the Parks Department? Their Hops on Hops. It was very cute.
Was it?
It was well done. I heard a lot of our neighbors on the social media that was very positive. You got a lot of positive feedback. And I just want to say, I want to appreciate all the hard work that everybody's done, but especially when you start seeing the events that we used to have, how creative they've been to try to make a U-turn and try to make it fun and keep it fun, even though it isn't what we expected from the great event before. I want to say they did a super event. So just a shout out to all of them.
Wally?
I have a question for Nathan, and I'm sorry, but this is the best place to ask. I've been getting calls on people telling me that they've gotten the In Focus magazine and they cannot find the app in the App Store to buy their $75 fee to get into the rec center. Do you know when that app is going to be available online or in the App Store that they can go and actually buy it? And what is it called? It's not Goodyear, but
The App Store, I'd have to find out exactly when that will go live and report back through the city manager.
that was good.
This
Then
week.
maybe she could put it in her manager's report for the week. That would
Perfect.
be great because we have a lot of interest in that. They're really excited to think that they can just go online and order their pass. They're excited. So
Perfect.
thank you.
We'll circulate that. Thanks.
Brandon?
Yeah, I also want to thank staff for they're working on the weeds in the median areas around Canyon Trails area. So thank you for that. They've been popping up all over the place. So thank you for the weed abatement. And then also, yeah, the Hops and Hops event was fun. My family enjoyed it, and brought my niece and nephew too. So it was good. Like I said, I heard nothing but good feedback from everybody that participated and people that wanted to go participate in it. So that was a good. I'm interested from the city manager to see what the attendance was there. So, but yeah, that was a good time. So thank you.
Any other comments? All right, City Manager, do you have anything to report to us?
All right, just because you guys want to know, Hop and Hops was a very successful 4-night event held at the Goodyear Ballpark. Estimated attendance was 7,255 participants.
Wow.
Over 1,400 cars came through that event. So we'll have a full update, I hope, with some pictures in the manager's memo this Friday. But there's your attendance numbers. Thank you, Mayor.
Forward to those pictures since I missed the entire event. I'm so glad it was so successful. A lot of work put in that. Well, with no further business to discuss, we're going to adjourn this, and I'll call the special meeting, and then we'll take a break. No further business to discuss. This meeting is adjourned. Yeah. And now I'd like to call a special meeting to order for April 5th, 2021. We are all present. So if